What's going on, everybody? We got some breaking news here for the Magic the Gathering world. I was kind of in the process of recording another video, and I noticed this kind of pop up on my timeline on Twitter. So basically, what has happened is they kind of announced that there going to be a change to set in draft boosters in the near future when it comes to Magic the Gathering, not just in paper, but also in Arena. But we're going to dive into this article first because they're going to be talking about the play boosters in general, and then I'll kind of dive into what they kind of touched on a little bit when it comes to how it's going to impact Arena. So first and foremost, if you are someone who's played physical Magic, you may have noticed this overall. Basically, what has happened is that at some point in the past, when they released Zendikar Rising, they also this is when they first broke out set boosters, draft boosters, and they also already had the collector boosters. So basically, I guess over the course of this period, ever since Zendikar Rising, they kind of like looked at the data and they kind of picked up on various things. And in this article, they kind of touch on some of the things that they've noticed when it comes to problems and some issues when it comes to just the overall way things are currently. So the first and foremost, the biggest problem is that set boosters have become better. Like, people consider set boosters to just be a better pack to buy into over draft boosters. So people kind of don't really use draft boosters for any sort of manner, just because outside of limited, they're not really as beneficial when it comes to opening cards out of the pack. Set boosters became the top choice for players, and basically meant that most players had the choice of what to buy when it came to opt in for set boosters over draft boosters. That set boosters are not designed for limited play, so stores only had set boosters in stock. They couldn't run drafts. So typically they noticed that there was issues that people wanted set boosters, but then stores would focus on set boosters but wouldn't buy draft boosters for being able to play limited events. So that's definitely their first big area of concern. The next area here is that it caused some inventory problems just because they have to produce X amount of boosters. So if you have to produce 3 different box types and 3 different packed inserts and all that stuff, it may cause inventory problems on their end. So that is definitely something that was kind of, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You know, if you have to create 3 different boxes, you then have to create 3 different sheets of cards to then get produced for those boxes. So overall, if they can focus on 2 different boxes, then it will make inventory in general much easier for them to keep the stock replenished and then being able to kind of still have the variety of boxes overall. After this, they kind of talk about there's been an abandonment of draft boosters. Personally, me as a Magic the Gathering player, I play both in Arena and also in paper. I typically focus on buying set boosters myself or getting set boosters in general, and then sometimes do dabble into the collector booster market. I never really ever touch draft boosters, just because, like this article kind of talks about, it's just not rewarding to me as a player when it comes to trying to get my value back into what I invested in the pack. So typically, you know, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure there's a lot of players who are also out there who gravitated to just getting set boosters just because there's just better pull rates of various things in that pack. Another thing to note, if you're someone who's not in the know, you may be confused about the various different types of packs overall. It causes confusion in the marketplace. So if someone's not as experienced when it comes to getting into Magic the Gathering, or they don't know the various packs types of Magic the Gathering, it causes customer confusion, which is never a good thing. If someone gets too confused, they may just not opt in to buy anything at all. Like, so say, for example, you may have a friend or something like that. They want to get you something for your birthday, and you just tell them, hey, get me some Magic the Gathering stuff. They may not know anything, and they may not know what to pick out when it comes to overall product. If you have less SKUs, it makes things a little bit more simple. If it's like you have a collector booster and then you have a play booster, it's one or the other, depending on how much they want to spend of what they will get you. Problem number 5 we have here is that sometimes boosters became less desirable when there's so much different ways of how people maybe want to look into get into boosters and getting rewarded. They kind of briefly talk about in this article, talking about when it comes to pricing out. Does the store prize out set boosters? Does the store prize out draft boosters? It typically will vary, I guess, depending on the player, but typically it makes it more confusing and make it overall, well, if I'm so they briefly touch up here in problem number 5 that it makes boosters in general less desirable when there's multiple choices, and when stores have to prize out, them having to kind of figure out based on inventory what to prize out based on what they have. It can become overall confusing, because if the store, let's just say, you know, runs a tournament, they prize out draft boosters, but, you know, the crowd wants set boosters, then everyone's upset, and then they're a little upset that they're not getting a decent set booster pack, and vice versa goes the other way. Sometimes when you play limited events, people want to also be prized out for draft boosters to then play more limited events. So that is kind of one of those things that they noticed that there was some friction there. And then the last problem that they kind of talk them on before they go into the issues is that every booster buyer was not getting all the cool stuff. Sure, collector boosters, they get all the cool stuff, and then the next step down would be the set boosters, where the packs are a little bit more random. Maybe you don't get all like the cool foil in, but you do still get all the cool different alternate arts and whatnot. And then draft boosters were kind of just left with the basic printing and the chance to add a random card for the most part, and they were not getting all that cool stuff. So they noticed that all the packs were not equal, and therefore that's, I think, another reason why they thought a lot of people did start gravitating towards set boosters over draft boosters when it came to opening packs, just because you have that chance of opening X amount of rares per pack. You get some theme in when it comes to the uncommons and commons, and then there's also that chance of that set slash list card, which is another cool thing that they've added into the set boosters, which make them a little bit more exciting. That one, maybe one in a box, you get like a decent rare that's a reprint of an older card, which definitely makes it pretty sweet. Now, talking about some issues that they noticed with, like, I guess the overall thing is that they kind of talked about that the issue one is that there's not enough cards. The problem with set boosters is that there's not enough cards to use them for drafts and things like that. The way the cards are spread out in that pack, it's a little more awkward, as a lot of packs are themed around a certain thing. So you've ever noticed, if you ever opened a set booster, you get cards in particular color types or archetypes in general, kind of around a particular theme, which doesn't make it very good for a limited environment, just because you're not getting all the cards for that particular theme. Another thing to note is that, like, kind of touching on this, the colors aren't balanced in that part. If the cards are kind of themed around a certain color, maybe a pack has a lot of red-black cards, but when it comes to a draft, that's not going to be really good for the table when it comes to drafting that pack, because then one pack is going to be focused on this color, another pack is going to be focused on another color. It makes it very hard to draft out of, even if the cards were at 15 overall. And then the ratio of rarities would have to shift in order to make it kind of anywhere as close to a set booster to make it close to a draft booster. Draft boosters typically have 10 commons, 3 uncommons, 1 rare / mythic rare, and then those don't include traditional foils, so on and so forth. And then set boosters have 3 to 6 commons, 3 to 6 uncommons, and 1 to 4 rare / mythic rares. And then to keep the fun of set boosters, they added also a card from the list to where it possibly takes over for that token card at the end of the pack. So each pack was not like the other, which then caused issues to each of them. And I guess the last issue here before we kind of dive into what this whole new play booster is that they would have to redesign everything heavily in order to kind of make anything of like the set boosters be closer to draft boosters, which then in that case, if they were to kind of do that, they would then make draft boosters essentially obsolete. So their idea to kind of correct this issue is that they would make these play boosters, which then in theory kind of will work a little bit better for both limited and also, for just opening as a player. So as you see here, this is kind of like the breakdown of these new play boosters. In the common slot, we have 1 to 6 commons. We then have the 7th slot, which could be a card from the list or a common. So that is actually kind of interesting. So now you don't get you still get the token technically at the end here. Then next after that, you have slots 8 through 10, you have uncommons, so you still get the 3 uncommons. You then have slot 11, which is a rare / mythic rare, basic lands included, and then you also have the non-foil wild card, and then foil wild card, which is kind of interesting here. And wild card is typically, when it comes to Arena, is a term that we use for cards that could be of any rarity. I guess their terminology is that this is going to be a non-foil card of any rarity, and this is going to be a card of any rarity as well, but in foil. And then they also have this green thing down here that says may contain booster fun, which means, I guess, in these certain slots there may be like booster fun, which they consider like the alternate prints, things like that. I don't know if they do anything special when it comes to, let's just say Wilds of Eldraine is a good example, when they have those cards from that other list that are also printed in the set. I'm going to assume that those slots will also have that as well. And then they kind of touch on all of this. For example, these are all common cards. In set boosters, you have the potential to get up to 6 commons, but that came at a cost of not getting additional uncommons, rares, mythic rares. So they noted that this is kind of like, this is going to be the set number that you're going to get per pack. And then most of the time, 7 out of 8 or 87.5%, this will be a 7th common, but the 8th time will be a card from the list. So basically what this means is that 1 out of every 8 packs from this new play booster box will actually have a set card. And then this is a little bit different than how the set cards worked when it used to take over the token. Basically, they kind of talk about the cards here. Here's your likelihood of getting a slot in the play booster. So they said the common from the main set, 9% you'll get a common or a common from a normal reprint from the list. 1.56% you'll get a rare / mythic rare from the reprint of the list. And then 1.56 will be a special guest card from the list, which is kind of interesting. I guess these are cards that are going to be exclusively added as they kind of add in the set. So these will be cards, I guess, as we get further down. I'm sure maybe they'll explain it a little bit further. Then they kind of talk about that the uncommon slot is very delicate. Like 3 uncommons is kind of basically a good sweet point when it comes to doing limited events or drafting and doing whatnot. If you go higher or lower, it kind of makes things imbalanced if you have more or less of these uncommons, because uncommons are kind of like very powerful cards when it comes to limited, because these are the next best things compared to rares and mythics, and these will typically round out a deck when it comes to drafting it. They talk about the rare / mythic rare. This slot is appeared both in set and draft boosters. You're guaranteed a mythic or rare from the main set. These will be 6 out of 7 times. 6 out of 7 times. All right. Slot 11 is the mythic / rare slot. 6 out of 7 times it'll be a rare. 1 out of 7 will be a mythic rare. It can also be a booster fun rare or mythic rare variant, which just means the alternate art printing. Like, for example, Wilds of Eldraine, the storybook looking stuff. This is just the land. This will hold basic common or a basic or common land from the main set. So meaning if, for example, it will have a basic land here, but if there was like, the tap dual lands that you gain like a life, this will kind of also be a slot that would be if that set included something like that. So this will also be, it will interchange in between the both. Then they have the non-wildcard slot or non-foil wildcard slot. This could be almost anything from the main set. It could be of any rarity, and the possibility being a booster fun variant. Whatever it is will be non-foil. Note the set boosters had 2 non-foil wildcard slots, where play booster has 1. So it has 1 less, but the difference is now we also have a traditional foil wildcard slot. This is just like the last slot, except the card is guaranteed to be a traditional foil. And then it's just like everything else. It's just going to be a random card of various things. Down here, slot 15, this is going to be just the token slot, the ad slot / art slot. So it now seems that when they go this way, the art cards are going to be a little bit less common. Whereas in set boosters, every pack had an art card and most people didn't really collect those. Now it seems like we're going to actually not have as many art cards in these packs, which is, I think, a good improvement, just because sometimes people like it, but not most people kind of throw them to the side and don't really consider them for anything. So they kind of then briefly touch on the differences here is that the difference from set boosters is that there's +2 additional playable cards. There's no connected commons or uncommons. This is where I briefly touched on before. In set boosters, the commons and uncommons are kind of connected in some sort of way, as either around some sort of archetype or sort of color theming. There's -1 non-foil wild card. There's -1 non-playable object. The art card is a little less frequent, so that is kind of going away. And then there's only a 1 in 3 opportunity of an art card. Set boosters always had an art card, is kind of the only difference there. Then they kind of touch on the difference now with the overall difference between this and a draft booster. So there's 1 less playable card because there was 15 playable cards in a draft booster. There's 3 less commons. There's +1 non-foil wild card, which is kind of like the new alternate art card. There's +1 traditional foiled wild card, whereas before in draft boosters, it was kind of a chance of getting that foil in of any card in the set. And then there's also a 1 in 8 opportunity of getting the card from the list, whereas the list didn't appear in a draft booster. And then there's roughly a 1 in 3 chance of getting an art card. So that is kind of like the 2 differences. These are kind of we're just getting a combination of both, and this is kind of like the best of both worlds. I guess they also considered this when it came to draft, and I'm sure they are indeed this to kind of make sure that this still works for drafting and doing limited events for the most part. And then they kind of talk about when we can expect this, as I guess this is kind of more a recent change. It doesn't seem like we're going to get it with the next set, but it does seem like we will get this with Murders of Karlov Manor, which is the set, I believe, next year that we're going to be getting. This means the Lost Caverns of Ixalan and Ravnica Remaster will not have them. We are telling the world early to impact how stores can order product. Play boosters will sell the same price as set boosters. Play boosters display boxes, however, will have 36 boosters like draft boosters did, and as 2 boxes were exactly enough for 3 8-player drafts. Because of this, 6 more boosters than set boosters displays right now. Be aware that the blah blah blah, this kind of more so goes into stuff for the store. And then they talk about will the play boosters make draft less fun? Their R&D team says it will not. We've been working very hard for years trying to understand the impacts of play boosters will have on draft. They have adapted of how in building sets to accommodate the whole thing. So the new set, when they release this alongside of, they kind of designed their set around this in mind. If play boosters have more rare / mythic rares on average, well, that means more bombs in limited formats. They're talking about briefly here. So if you have a bunch of chances at getting rare / mythic rares, you may make the overall drafting experience a little bit more bomby like. So sometimes you may get that like a nice mythic rare or a nice rare in this set. And then they just briefly talk about 14 playable cards. Always had 15. Blah 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 blah. Will limited events likely yes, because set boosters slightly cost more. Limited events will go up in price probably because of this. Typically, I don't think too much more depending on where you play. Typically, I think like the difference in price between a draft booster and a set booster is probably like $2 roughly. So depending on how your store runs things, they may not even increase the price depending on how much they already charge for a limited event, because they may just eat the cost if they think that the additional cards, like the additional packs, are any different. But yet again, this is definitely kind of exciting. It's kind of one of those things. I do think as a person who has consumed physical Magic product over the past like couple years, it's definitely very confusing. It's definitely weird that sometimes things are very wonky overall. But when it comes to all of this, we're going to take a little bit of a look when it comes to how this impacts overall things in MTG Arena. So basically, these packs will be coming to MTG Arena. Basically, what they kind of touched on here, these packs will be draftable, up to 4 rare/mythic rares, possibility of a card of Magic history. So in Arena, we are going to be officially getting cards from the list/special guests, which are cards that they introduce, with these sets alongside. So that is definitely pretty sweet in general. So what they kind of briefly touch on, but they haven't gone into full detail, is changes to MTG Arena limited boosters. The alignment with play boosters will premiere at MTG Arena alongside the new set. They'll be used for limited play events, so that draft and sealed will continue to mirror the tabletop experience at MTG Arena. So that's pretty cool. So if you play draft, you play any sealed, it'll exactly mimic how it should be in person. Limited packs in MTG Arena will include new features like limited packs on MTG will include new features of play boosters, like having cards from the list and special guests, because MTG Arena's older formats are different from tabletop. We will have them redesign. They'll redesign the list when it comes to the list overall, because they're not going to give you a card that's not from a card that doesn't exist already in the game, because they would have to add those cards, and that could be very taxing overall. We'll be playing limited events that use play boosters, cost more on MTG Arena. They do not plan to increase the entry cost, so events should still stay the same on limited events, and then they will be making any change to non-limited packs. None packs obtained outside of limited events purchased in MTG Arena store obtained from the set mastery, etc., will remain the same. So this looks like it's only going to impact anything that is when it comes to limited. It's not going to impact the actual cards in the store. So if you want to have a chance at playing with these cards and kind of experiencing it, it looks like in the future, it does look like you're going to have to actually play the limited events if that's something that you're into. But overall, we won't really know the impacts of this change until these do release next year. But with that being said, it's kind of interesting that I do think this was kind of a long time coming. This is something that I feel like people were kind of talking about, that there's just too much product and there's not, people really only focus on a little bit of the product, and then I'm sure other product does not sell as well as it once did. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Are you interested about these changes when it comes to these boxes and packs being changed overall? If you like the video, hit that like button. Definitely helps out a lot. If you're new here, you want to know when I post new videos on the channel, hit that subscribe button. But until next time, I'll see you in the next video.